Are you ready to grow your financial practice to heights you've never imagined? You're listening to the Elevated Advisor Podcast with your online business mentor and host, David Scranton. Each week, you'll learn Dave's secrets that have helped him become one of the most successful financial advisors in the country. So are you ready to become an elevated advisor? The Elevated Advisor Podcast starts now.
And welcome to this edition of the Elevated Advisor Podcast. I'm David Scranton, and it's great to have you here because today we have a very, very special guest, and it's my good friend, JoAnn Regan from Phoenix, Arizona, founder and owner of Financial Security Group. And JoAnn, thanks so much for being here in Fort Lauderdale with some of your friends on vacation, but taking some time to come in the studio to do this podcast with me.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's really been a great weekend with my friends and some of the things that we were able to do in Fort Lauderdale. And now I'm coming and getting to spend some time with you, and always like spending time with you, learning new things, and being able to share my experiences as well.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you took some time for this. And
Thank you.
just so you know, the reason I think it's such a special treat today is because for twofold. Number one, you know, we go to these conferences, and if you're like me, when you go to these conferences, it's a male-dominated industry, and I've always wondered why we don't have more uber-successful women in this business, and I've always been an advocate for that. Well, here today with us is somebody whom I'd consider to be an uber-successful woman in the financial services industry. But it's not just that JoAnn is a female, but it's also that she has what a lot of you really want to have, and it's an all-encompassing practice, doing investments, doing insurance, doing tax preparation, tax planning, doing estate planning, really having it all under one house. So now, I know you didn't start that way, JoAnn. I know you didn't start with just doing everything at once. So if you would mind giving our listeners a little feel for how you started, how you got into this industry, and then how you morphed into what you have today.
Okay. Well, I actually started in the tax industry first. I went to work for a CPA firm in Texas. We specialized in wealthy Texas farmers and ranchers.
Okay.
And that was kind of a unique situation for me because I got to see firsthand how those people would be land rich and cash poor. Mm-hmm. I also got to see the tax consequences of what happened if they happened to pass on and what would happen. A lot of times those families would have to sell off big pieces of the ranches and the farms because they didn't have the money to pay the taxes for that. Mm-hmm. That really got me interested in the estate planning side of it. And so I had always had some kind of a desire to try to figure out how I could incorporate that into what I did. So I worked in that industry for quite a number of years. And then eventually I ended up with an estate planning company that they did the estate planning side of it, you know, the trust, the wills. Really got a great education in that and how to do it and how not to do it. Mm-hmm. And also was introduced to some of the financial side of it from that experience. Felt like I could do it better on my own because they didn't do it all. And I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity to be able to maybe teach some people how to put it all together, because putting it all together is what really makes it work. People... Right. I don't know if you've ever had a situation where somebody will tell you, well, you can do that, but you should talk to your tax advisor, or you should talk to your financial planner, or you should talk to this person, because they are not knowledgeable in that area. And I love it when people can come to us and we can do that for them.
Yeah, isn't it crazy that, you know, the couple things I've seen, they're going through my head as we're talking. First of all, I took a period of time in my career when I went to work for SageMark Consulting, basically Cigna, where you're charging a fee. I wanted to learn how to charge a fee to a more affluent person for financial planning.
Right.
And I learned a lot. It was great. I don't love that model, though, because I find that when you charge a fee, sometimes they don't want to implement through you. Mm-hmm. And inevitably, the investment advisor is screwing up the allocation. The accountant or the attorney did something wrong. So the fact that you're in control of it all in-house means there's collaboration, means that people are talking to each other. You know, it's all coordinated. I think that's important.
It is. And, you know, for me, I have a process in my office that I think is really important. To me, the most important thing is always to get the estate planning in place first, because I feel like you need to know what's going to happen when you pass. How are your assets going to pass? What are the tax implications going to be? What are the financial implications going to be? Are your beneficiaries able to handle the funds that are coming their way, and so forth? So I really think you start with that. That's core. And then from there, we start working on the tax side of it, the tax planning. And then from there, hopefully if they're willing to, follow through, which most of them are, we're able to implement the financial part of it in. And it's just a really nice solution for most of our clients that they can be able to see how everything is coordinated and how it works together.
It's interesting because that's the opposite of what a lot of people listening to us are envisioning. You're thinking as an investment advisor, you come in, you could do the investments, and then you can do the taxes, or have somebody on your team do the taxes, somebody on your team do the estate planning. You're doing it the opposite. And by the way, the fact you're doing all of it is important, because the other thing that I hate is these big firms, a lot of the big firms will say, we cannot give tax advice.
Right.
Well, how do you separate tax advice from investment advice? I'm not sure I understand, because there's tax consequences, and what the return is that people get after tax is what they really care about. Or even capital assets, right? Step up in basis at death. That's part of estate planning.
Absolutely.
But yet a lot of the big firms prohibit people from talking about those types of things. And you actually lead with it. In fact, isn't it true that, most of your clients today on the investment side come from either the estate planning arm or come from the income tax arm?
I would say 90%.
Yeah.
Come from that. When I think it's a confidence builder in the clients that we have when we're talking to them about the estate planning, and you almost always have to talk about the assets that they have anyway when you're doing estate planning, because how are they going to be able to transfer those assets upon death? So it's a natural conversation to have with them. And so as we're talking about the assets, I'm looking at things and I'm seeing things, that I always tell them, at some point in time, I would like to sit down and discuss these with you on how we can incorporate all of this into your plan. And it does. They all are natural marriages of things together. And having that all in one office is such a service to our clients. I really feel like they value that.
Yeah, I've done it the opposite in my office in Connecticut, where starting with the investments and adding on all these other features.
Right.
And just so you know, for our listeners here, that in this particular case, JoAnn is actually an enrolled agent, so she can do tax returns herself, although she has a couple of people in her office that do a bulk of that for her. So it's not like you have to get in and do it all yourself. In my practice, I have an enrolled agent that does that, right? He's part of our team year-round. And when it comes to estate planning, you might be thinking, wait a minute, I'm not an estate planning attorney. I can't do this. Well, in JoAnn's case, it just so happens to be that in Arizona, to do trusts and things like that, there's a lot of estate planning you can do without being an attorney. Some things you do, some things you don't have to be. So in other states, there are still ways to do it. There are services which can hook up financial advisors with attorneys in the state that can do a lot of the estate planning, where your office can still hold people's hands. You can still charge a fee to help people with this, make it a profit center, and even lead with the estate planning. But again, there's a way around it in almost every state to do this legally. And see, the beauty about it is, like you said, and think about this, right? If the accountant says to do something, people tend to listen to it. If the financial salesperson says to do it, maybe not, right?
Right.
The estate planning attorney. Some of you might be able to relate to this if you came from the insurance background, right? You would try to sell somebody a second to die policy for estate taxes, and they'd be hemming and hawing. Once the estate planning attorney says, hey, you need this policy, they come right over and say, hey, can I apply for a policy?
Right.
So you're coming in from a point of strength as a real trusted advisor on the legal side, on the tax side, and you have this information. So now, from what you were telling me before, the transition to becoming a financial client is actually almost easy in some cases.
I would say it's almost an automatic. And I don't want to say that, without giving reverence to, what other advisors do. But when we are able to provide a trusted service like their estate planning, and they have put their confidence in us, and then we are doing their taxes and we're doing a good job on that, and they're seeing, benefit from doing that with us. As soon as we start talking about the financial side of our business, and actually we don't even have to talk about it, most of them know that we do it versus, based on things that we have on display. They start asking us, what do you do and how do you do it? And, once we start explaining our process and how things work and what we are trying to help them with, those people, they really start moving closer and closer towards us. The other thing that I think is really important to mention here, though, is that on the estate planning side, when somebody passes, we offer to assist our clients with, some of the transitioning of things to the beneficiaries. That also gives us kind of an inroad because we become trusted. Our clients want to know if they can invite their children in so we can meet them so that the kids will know who we are and what we do, so that when they do pass, that we're able to help those kids who are normally grown adults, obviously, but to help those kids to be able to manage those assets. And so we become multi-generational in the things that we do.
And after doing this for a few years, the kids are in their 50s, maybe even 60s.
Absolutely.
Where they're on the brink of retirement and they need some planning.
They do. And it's funny because a lot of them, they're coming into money that they don't have currently, and they don't know what to do with it. And their parents trusted us, so it's an easy transition for the kids to be able to take us on as their advisors as well.
Yeah, I personally, I'm biased toward independent advisors, right? That's my passion, is helping independent advisors just flourish.
Right.
And I couldn't work for a big firm that says you can't give tax advice, you can't give estate planning advice. I mean, if I'm a CFP, I've got a master's degree in financial services. Yes, I'm not an attorney, I'm not an enrolled agent, but I know enough that I can still give some advice. But
sure.
If I'm precluded from doing that, I wouldn't want to work for that firm personally.
Well, and most everything that you see in a financial advisor's office absolutely always disclaims, no tax or legal advice is given here. And if you are licensed or you have someone in your office that's licensed to be able to do that, well, now all of a sudden that doesn't become as important, because now you can give them the advice that they need in order to make a good decision, which I think is important.
Or do like I did. Bring the person on who's the enrolled agent who can give the tax advice.
Right.
It makes it easier that way.
It does.
And it's great because you have really you have three profit centers, essentially.
I do.
Yeah.
I've operated my company with three different legs of the business, and each one of them is independent. Each one of them is a profit center. And quite frankly, each one of them brings in business for the other companies. If I have somebody that comes in as a financial client first, then normally they become an estate planning and a tax client. If they come in as a tax client first, they become the other two. It works very well. To be able, it's a way that you can build your business within your business.
And in the spring of 2020, when the pandemic hit, and everyone's out there doing seminars and things, they're wondering, oh my goodness, where is my next case going to come from? People were more motivated during that time to do their estate plans. They had to get their tax returns done, right? So at least two of the three silos were going to continue, as well as any residual income on assets under management. So maybe people weren't coming in as much to reallocate money, but that's okay, because 2 out of 3 were still working. Whereas unfortunately, a lot of our listeners, if they have one silo to earn income, and that was threatened, that was a pretty scary situation for a lot of them to be in, 3.5 years ago.
Well, I remember back when COVID hit and everybody was closing down, estate planning and tax were both considered essential businesses.
Sure.
And so although we did have to close for a couple of weeks, we were able to open back up. And that happened right in tax season. So it was really a terrifying time for everybody because we were hoping to be able to get everything done. But again, it made me feel good about having the 3 different segments of our business, because that's what kept us going. It really did. We weren't reliant on just one thing. We still had the 3 arms of our business, and they were still operating very well.
That's great. And helps keep your staff on, too, because how many staff members do you have now? Where are you up to?
14.
14.
Right.
Yeah. You've grown a bit.
I have.
But different people have different functions. You have some people on the tax side, some people on the estate side, some people that are more financial sales.
Exactly.
And so you've really built an agency and organization, which is wonderful. And again, having leads coming in through different sources, which if you're gonna feed other financial advisors, you need to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you have to cross-sell. I always say, it's like Gillette. If Gillette made the razors and didn't make the shaving cream, they'd be kind of crazy. Well, I think it's the same thing here. If you're doing one thing in the financial services world, you're not doing the other 2, you're really missing an opportunity.
I think you are. And I think that a lot of people are scared about doing what I did. I feel very fortunate because I was trained in all of these things individually and then was able to put it together. But it's like you said, if you don't have the ability to do taxes, that doesn't preclude you from hiring somebody who can help you.
That's
Or
right.
if you can't do the legal side of it, doesn't preclude you from hiring someone that can do that. And so I do honestly believe that it sets my business apart
It
from
does.
other places, and I feel very strongly that it's a good way to put your business together.
And that's especially helpful in the Phoenix area because if any of you have ever worked in Phoenix, or maybe some of you do now, or you know have a friend who's an advisor in Phoenix, marketing initiatives for financial advisors are very difficult in Phoenix. For whatever reason, I don't know why, but when you look at people, whether they're doing seminars or direct mail campaigns or you name it, the response rate in Phoenix is always one of the lowest in the nation.
It
so
is.
it's great to have those other feelers out there to bring people in the door with needed services, frankly.
Right. I have tried to do seminars in the past, and like you said, our response rates were terrible. It was expensive to try to do, and it just was not working for me. I personally haven't done a seminar, and I couldn't even tell you how many years because I just don't need to anymore.
Right.
Because of the other businesses that we do, it brings in the clients that we need, and so that's really helpful.
So when are you going to buy a property casualty firm and bring that under the wrap also? That's the one part you're missing.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to pass on
You're
that.
pass on that? You're not
Yeah.
So, and by the way, you have another thing that is really giving you energy, giving you juice in life these days, is that you have a grandson, and I hate to say grandson because you don't look like you're old enough to have a grandson, but
Thank
you do.
you.
And he is the heir apparent to your business. So that I'm sure breathed a little bit more life and excitement into you, trying to bring him up through the channels, learning all three businesses so that he can ultimately take over.
Well, the nice thing about my grandson, whose name is Jared, he started working with me when he was 15 years old, and he started at the bottom of the pile. He had
Right.
to empty the trash and file and do things like that. And he's actually grown up in the business, learning each and every phase because it was an intent that he would eventually be taking over. And he's 27, but he has a really strong mind for this.
He
and
does.
he's very mature for his age. I especially have noticed that maturity in the last couple of years. And so being able to bring him up into the business. But what's great about him too is he has his own ideas. And, I'm kind of old and stuck in my ways, and he's kind of
Right.
young and more innovative. Like you say, he's
Sometimes that's
more
good.
gas and I'm more brake. And so the combination of the two, I really think he's going to be really highly successful. My clients already like him and trust him, and they ask for him over me sometimes. I'm like, wow,
No, he's a really sharp young man. He, just so you know, he came. JoAnn sent him to my office in Connecticut this summer. Say, hey, Dave, will you sit with him for a few days and have him meet different people to see how the office works and just to get a different view? Because sometimes, when you're training a family member, it can be a bit of a challenge. So he said to me, he goes, yeah, I feel like my grandmother sent me off to boarding school here in Connecticut for a couple of days. That's kind of what it was. But my first comment, if you remember, when he left, I think I texted you or called you, and I said,
Yes.
he's a really cool young man, and he really is.
Yeah, I'm
Smart
really
guy.
proud of him and proud of the work that he's trying to do. And I think he's going to be very successful. And he's also something that a lot of people say is that if you're too young, you can't be successful in the financial industry. I think that's not true. I think if you're compassionate about what you do, you care about the people, and you have a passion for the work and you believe in what you're doing, I don't think that age matters. I think that you can make that work, and he is proving me to be correct. He is actually being very successful at what he does.
So speaking about these limiting beliefs that people have in the industry, oh, I'm too young to be successful at my age. I've heard some ladies say before in the financial service industry, some women say, we're at a disadvantage because, a lot of people just want a man who's a financial advisor. And I don't see it that way. And I know you don't either. So I'd like you to talk about that a little bit, because I've heard both sides of the argument. And frankly, I think women have advantages that we don't have as men. And you men that are listening, maybe you can relate to this, but we talk too much. I mean, I'm probably talking too much today. I have a special guest here. I should be doing more listening, right? We talk too much. And women are much better listeners. They pick up on nonverbal signals. They have much better empathy. And that's why I'm shocked that there aren't more ultra successful women financial advisors like you. So to the women that are listening that might be thinking this or might be struggling with this limited belief, how do you respond to that when you hear that?
Well, I have to say that I've been in this industry for quite a number of years. And I think when I very first started, and I'm going to be aging myself here, but I started in this, about 40 years ago. When I very first started, I would say that might have been relatively correct, that it was a little bit more challenging. Men were viewed as having more knowledge in this industry than women were. There were fewer women that were successful in it. But as the years have gone by, I don't believe that at all anymore. I feel like you said, we have the ability to listen, to interpret, to read body language, to do a lot of things. When I have people come into my office, I know how to appeal to their emotional responses as well as their intelligent responses. I know how to do that. And I think that there are women that come in that would prefer to deal with a woman. A lot of my clients, they're couples, they're elderly, and the man flat out says, if something happens to me, my wife is not going to know what to do. And I feel comfortable knowing that she has you to come to as another female. And so I think that limiting belief is no longer valid in any shape, form, or fashion.
I agree completely. And I think if most people listening were honest, they'd realize that women make more than 50% of the decision in a family. If there's a husband and wife, the women, they have 50% more than if you have a choice, you're going to cater to the husband or cater to the wife.
Right.
You cater to the wife. That's the smart thing to do.
I agree.
And sometimes she might sit there quietly. They go home and talk about it, but ultimately she's making more than half that decision. And if you don't realize that, hopefully you realize it now, and that alone is worth the price of admission today. And the reason a lot of women say they don't feel comfortable with male financial advisors is because they talk over their heads and they make them feel stupid.
Yeah.
And for some reason, men have this thing that they tend to do that if they're not totally focused on the opposite. If for you, it's being a female, it's natural to talk to your women clients, whether they're single, whether they're married.
Yeah, what I think happens is that, and I have male employees that are financial advisors, and when I listen to them, they develop a camaraderie with the male because that seems to be a natural thing for them to do, and they kind of end up overlooking a female. Well, I can tell you as a female that it makes me furious. It's like, I am 50% of this decision. I feel like, I should be included in this conversation. And that's a mistake. Just like I can't just talk to the female, I do have to also address the male's needs as well. So as a financial advisor, does it matter if you're male or female? No. What it matters is how good are you at reading your clients and being able to help them make sure that they both understand and are on the same page. That's what's important.
We all have advantages. We all have disadvantages, right? I mean, you say, well, okay, a lot of people think it's a disadvantage to be too young in the business. Well, it's sometimes a disadvantage to be too old. Right now, I'm starting to get questions about, so what's your backup plan? You mean if I drop dead? Is that what you're saying, right? So it's almost like no matter where you are, there's always a reason or excuse, if you will, to say, well, I'm at a disadvantage when talking to this type of prospect. But you have to put all that behind you and just move on.
Well, and that's funny you should say that because I get asked that often. People will say, well, what happens if something happens to you? And I just pick up the phone and call Jared and say, Jared, come in. And I introduce him as the heir apparent, and they go, oh, okay, we got it. We understand. So it really is, there's no advantage or disadvantage. It's up to the individual to be successful or not be successful based upon what they believe.
100%. So what's your final advice you would give to someone if they maybe they didn't start like you did on the tax and estate planning side. Maybe they start on the financial side, but then they want to be able to have kind of a full service firm. What's your best advice for our listeners who might want to do that?
I would say you need to have some experience in those areas. And the best way to get experience is to go in, somehow get under a mentorship or something with someone that can help you, or hire somebody into your office, that can help you to understand it better. I mean, there's nothing worse than trying to help clients and you don't know what you're talking about. So obviously you have to have the knowledge and some experience, and you can get that. There's people out there that'll come to work for you or will mentor you and allow you, to get the experience that you need. And once you feel comfortable with what you know, then you're able to go out and successfully generate those types of businesses without any problem.
And the key is to think of yourself as a business owner. Don't think of yourself as a financial advisor. You're a business owner who happens to do financial advisory work.
Right.
So if you heard, JoAnn said, I've got 14 people that are part of my team. Well, it wasn't always that way. In fact, it wasn't even that way 6 years ago. It was a smaller crew.
Correct.
So the reality is that, she's made that transition from being an advisor or an estate planning practitioner or a tax preparer to being a business owner who can run these different businesses. So that's one thing I would certainly give as a takeaway that I encourage all of you who are listening to do, is to realize you truly are a business owner and think of that first and the financial advisory second.
I agree. I think that's really good advice, and I think that anybody that's trying to expand their business and expanding it the way that I did into the 3 different segments, I totally would encourage you to do that. It's really a great way to run your business.
Yeah, it is. I love it. All right, we're almost out of time here, and I know you have a flight to catch. So
I do.
So, JoAnn, thanks you so much once again for just being here, for being part of our team, being in our studio. This has been great. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And I hope you enjoyed it also. Again, JoAnn Regan from Phoenix, Arizona, owner and founder of Financial Security Group. I'm David Scranton, and you're listening to the Elevated Advisor podcast, and I hope that you'll join us next week. Thank you.
You have been listening to the Elevated Advisor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your colleagues. If you would like to talk about elevating your financial firm, reach out to us at theelevatedadvisorpodcast.com. Investment advisory services offered through Sound Income Strategies, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Sound Income Strategies, LLC, and the Retirement Income Source, LLC, are associated entities.